Hello everybody and welcome back to the second shelf and to another Books Weekly, my weekly video in which I discuss the books that I've either finished from a previous week or read last week or started last week. And apart from the first book, the book I finished from the previous week, this week's reading and lots of movies was all about law. I will explain in a minute. But first, the first book. And that's Emma O'Toole's Girls Will Be Girls, the book that I finished from last week. And the book is a part autobiographical. Emma O'Toole is an Irish scholar and writer born in the mid-1980s, and she recounts her growing up and especially focusing on the way a girl's body is looked at and what expectations society has with regards to a female body, being thin, being hairless. Well, that's not new. That was one of the things, by the way, that surprised me most, because Emma O'Toole is born 2 decades after me, and still very little seems to have changed with regards to the expectations we have towards a female body. What Emma O'Toole does then is she plays with the expectations we have. She decided, I think 1 or 2 years before she wrote the book, she decided to not shave her body hair anymore. So hair under her arms, her legs. She didn't shave anymore, and she caused an uproar on television when displaying the hairs under her armpits. I thought this part was the most interesting. The way she tried to be playful with gender roles, the way she tried to be playful with expectations, trying to cross-dress, bending gender roles. That was for me, the most interesting part. I think I'm not quite the target audience of the book. I'm just too old for that. So I'd be really interested if you have read it, if you are more, well, the target audience, meaning people, men and women, now in their 30s. And if you read the book, what did you think? Could you relate to the experiences she recounts? Do you have similar experiences in while you grew up? That would be interesting to me. And I think it's mainly a book for young men and women. So young men and women born, I don't know, between 1980 and 1990 or later. And it's not quite a book for an older feminist like me. But still, it's worth a read. So if you're interested in the topic, try it out. And then on to the theme of the week. Let's kill all the lawyers. For those of you who know me longer or from Twitter, you will know that I teach legal ethics at the University of Amsterdam, and I'm currently working on a non-fiction book, an essay that has for my Dutch publisher, and that will be published in April, and the title is The Good Lawyer. So I explore the ethics of a lawyer. What does it mean to be an ethically good lawyer? So not a good lawyer in the sense that you win all the cases, but a good lawyer in the sense that you're ethically good, that you obey the ethical rules of the profession, that you are in compliance with the legal ethics in general, the rule of law, and so forth. And the epigraph I chose for the book is a quote from Shakespeare's Henry VI. First thing we do, let's kill all the lawyers. Hence the title of this Books Weekly. And in the book, I will draw from my own experience as a lawyer, the more controversial cases I did, of course, the legal framework in which the lawyer has to operate, but I also look at books and movies, the way in which lawyers are described or depicted in books and movies, and especially with a focus on their behavior, whether it's ethical or not. I'm not going to discuss the 15 or 16 or 17 movies I watched, but I'll listed them all in the down bar below if you're interested chronologically. it's really fun to watch if you like to watch legal movies, courtroom dramas, and all the movies I listed are focusing on the behavior of the lawyer. But I also read 2 books that I will incorporate in my little essay. And the first one is, of course, a classic, and that's Harper Lee's To Kill a Mockingbird. You will probably know To Kill a Mockingbird, but of those of you who haven't read it, Harper Lee was an American writer. She grew up in the late 1920s, early 1930s in the south of the United States. She died in February of this year, and To Kill a Mockingbird was her only book, a worldwide bestseller, until half a year before her death, when the first draft of her first novel, Go Set a Watchman, was published. But she will always be known as the writer of To Kill a Mockingbird. The story of the book centers around Scout, a young girl living with her brother and her widowed father in Maycomb, which is a fictional town in Alabama. Her father, Atticus Finch, is the lawyer of the town, and the book describes the events that happen when Atticus Finch defends a young black man who is accused of assaulting and raping a young white girl. Now, Atticus Finch is interesting to me for my little book because he is considered the good lawyer. If people are asked in the legal profession, name an example of an ethically good lawyer, then Atticus Finch will come up, no doubt. And I think that you could look at him with a little more nuance. And I'm not saying that because of Go Set a Watchman, which also describes Atticus Finch, and we learn that he's quite the racist in that first book. I'm not talking about that, but I'm talking about what he does in order to defend his client in To Kill a Mockingbird. And you could ask the question whether he actually has the best interest of the client in mind, which is the first principle if you are a lawyer, that you always have to have your client's best interest in mind, or whether he defends the client in order to feel good, to feel that he had done ethically the right thing. Because what Atticus Finch does in the courtroom, and the courtroom scenes are wonderful in the book, is he defends his client, claiming his innocence, and of course the client is innocent, because he knows that that his client will be convicted, but he wants at least to have his story out once and to tell the people that he is innocent. But what Atticus Finch doesn't do is he doesn't question the racist legal system as such. So he operates within that system, knowing that whatever he does, his client will be convicted. And so you could ask yourself whether Atticus Finch's attitude is really of high moral standard, or whether he is just doing the right thing, quote unquote, because that makes himself feel better, makes him feel better about himself, and not looking at what it means to his client, because there would have been other avenues to go in the defense of his client. So that's why the book is interesting to me. And if you haven't read it, as I said, it's a classic, and it's the voice of Scout, the young daughter, is really fabulous. Also how the town is described and the incidents that happen, because it's not only about the legal issues and the courtroom drama, it's also about a town in Alabama during the Great Depression in the 1930s, and how people cope with that and how their life looks like. So even if you're not interested in the legal side, it's still absolutely worth a read. And the second book I reread this week is also a classic, a non-fiction classic, and that's Hannah Arendt, Eichmann in Jerusalem, a report on the banality of evil. The book was published in 1963, and Hannah Arendt, an American philosopher of German descent, who had to flee the country because she is Jewish, was Jewish because she's dead already, of course. And Hannah Arendt went to the trial in Jerusalem, the Eichmann trial, and reported about it. It took her more than 2 years or something to complete the book, so it was published well after the trial had been finished and Eichmann had been convicted and executed. And it caused a lot of uproar because of her statement that Eichmann is actually a banal figure, banality of evil, as it says in the book. I'm looking at the book not so much because of her analysis of evil, but more to see about a trial in very difficult circumstances. Because if you are a lawyer or a judge in a trial of a defendant, of an accused, which is considered the devil, everybody wants your client dead. I'm interested in how that works, how you operate as a lawyer in such a context. So that was the reason that I reread the book this week, but it's certainly interesting from many points of view. So if you haven't read it, if you're interested in the topic, it's certainly one of the must-reads if you want to know more about the Eichmann trial and the way you can describe and analyze evil. And the theme of the law will continue well into next week, because the last book for this video is a book that I've just started, and that's also a non-fiction book, Helen Garner, This House of Grief. Helen Garner is a contemporary Australian author whom I really like. I especially like her novels, but also her memoir, The Spare Room, in which she describes her relationship to a very, very ill friend and the dying of that friend. Helen Garner was born in 1942. She just published, I think, beginning of this year, mid this year, a new collection of essays, which I haven't read yet, but which I will certainly read. And This House of Grief was published in 2014, and it's Helen Garner's account of a real life crime. In 2005 in Australia, a father who had been divorced drove with his 3 young sons off a bridge into the water. He could save himself, but his 3 sons died. He was then tried for murder, and Helen Garner describes the trial in her book. So that's what I'm going to read next week. See how a non-lawyer looks at a court trial with a controversial case, because the accused in this case always claimed that he was innocent, that it was an accident. So that is hopefully interesting to me. So this was it for my Books Weekly, which was more of a movies weekly. Thank you for watching. I hope you've enjoyed it. Give it a thumbs up if you did. Have a good weekend, for what weekend is left, and I'll see you all next time. Bye-bye.